This episode is brought to you by Alumni Q. For over 20 years, Alumni Q has been partnering with higher education institutions to build real, lasting connections that drive engagement, whether through events, volunteer management, or personalized fundraising strategies. Their software is designed to meet busy, accomplished alumni where they are, making it easier to connect, communicate, and involve them in meaningful ways. From personalized event experiences to targeted communications, Alumni Q ensures your constituents feel seen and valued. With 96% of clients staying with them long-term, Alumni Q's active support and responsive development make sure you always have the tools you need when you need them. If you're looking for a trusted partner that truly understands higher education and is committed to helping your institution succeed, consider Alumni Q, powering the connections that last. Visit alumniq.com to learn. Hey everyone, and welcome. Thank you for listening to Alumless World for May 30th, 2025. This is the AI Transformation and Advancement Edition. On Alumless World, we talk about constituent engagement strategies and education advancement from a global perspective. I'm Ryan Catherwood, and I'm joined by my colleague, Alumless World co-host Nicole Kempton. Hey, Nicole, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you. We publish a new episode of Alumless World every other Friday at 11:30 a.m. GMT, and we broadcast a 30-minute bonus edition on our podcast feed as well. So be sure to pick that up. And if you're listening by podcast, we appreciate you. And we invite you to follow Chris Marshall Advancement Consulting on LinkedIn. If you find Alumless helpful, please do consider sharing it with others. We greatly appreciate the team at Alumni Q for being our Alumless World presenting sponsor. Okay, Nicole, good show lined up for today. How about introducing today's guests?
Yeah, I'm very excited for today's show. We have Holman Chin with us, and Holman is the Executive Director of Development at INSEAD, and he's based in Singapore. And he's had a really interesting career spanning several industries and continents. And he's now really starting to think seriously about INSEAD's advancement efforts and how they can leverage the power of AI. And so we're going to talk about a bunch of things, his career and also the AI transformation. And we have a great hour ahead.
Yeah, a timely topic for today. Let's bring out Holman. Hey, how are you, Holman?
Hey, Ryan. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. So let's, Holman, maybe get started with some background about you. Can you share a little bit about how you came to be involved in advancement work? I think it was a bit of a winding road, like it has been for many of us, and maybe a little bit about your position at INSEAD and what you're doing today.
Sure. As you probably know, and our listeners, advancement is not exactly the thing you think about when you're 10, about what you want to do with your life. It's a winding road. It's not an obvious profession until you get asked to give your first time and like, oh, what department is this? But originally I'm from the US, the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland, Bay Area. I went to Berkeley as well. And I spent the earlier part of my life there in various industries, as you mentioned. I started out studying architecture. Eventually, I moved into private banking. I had a stint in film and media, which I continued when I moved to Singapore in the early 2000s. And I started pursuing documentary work, production, making films, a passion of mine, which I'll talk more about later in terms of storytelling. Eventually started a media magazine here, delving into politics of all places in Singapore, but you can. And then somewhere in there, I started my advancement professional career working with the National University of Singapore. I was brought on to manage their or investigate their first campaign, which interestingly never went public. And I managed their donor relations, events, comms, campaign teams. And then I stayed there for about 7 years before moving to the NUS Medical School for about 2 years. I followed my ex-boss there to start up a mind science center to do a looking at non-intrusive, non-drug means to kind of address different neurological diseases. Help them raise money for that. And also, I started working on the NUS Medicine International Council, which is a subscription-based model for volunteer engagement, which is very interesting for non-alumni. Kind of put the medical school on the map globally. And then around 2018, I was interested in joining INSEAD, a very different, very global institution, as you know, focused on executive education and MBA. I've been there for officially last week, 7 years. I started out also in campaign there, managing donor relations, digital marketing, as well as the campaign in advancement communications. When I joined, we launched the campaign. And then I took it on for the last 5 years until we closed it in 2023. Our third capital campaign, record number of donors, funds raised, very alumni centric, and a great kind of starting point to help us with our alumni engagement and volunteer engagement. I moved from executive director of campaign and advancement services to executive director of development for fundraising last March, in order to oversee all the fundraising teams from annual giving all the way up to major and principal giving as well, looking over what we do. So it's been a very long, interesting journey, 16 years in development, but very rewarding in terms of learning. And as you know, it's not only an art, but it's also a science, especially now in the age of AI and data analytics.
Yeah, Holman, actually, I think INSEAD is one of the most interesting schools on the planet for lots of reasons. But maybe for listeners that aren't as familiar with INSEAD, can you tell a little bit more about the institution, what makes it unique? And with your experience across two different institutions, NUS and INSEAD, what fundamental principles of development work remain consistent regardless of the organization?
Sure. I mean, the two institutions couldn't be more different night and day. National University of Singapore, they're both great institutions. National University of Singapore, like many public institutions, is very large. It is government funded. And it also relies on donations, but not in the same way as INSEAD, a much smaller institution with a global network. So working for NUS was very top down. So the actually a lot of the donations came from non-alumni in terms of the larger ones, institutions that wanted to support one of the 15 different schools and faculties. So that's one of the advantages of a larger institution, because you do have a medical school, the public policy to business and engineering. Whereas with INSEAD, it's a very unique institution, long history, but global. So we have campuses in Fontainebleau, where we started, to Singapore, and then now Abu Dhabi, with a small facility in San Francisco. So our alumni at INSEAD are very passionate about INSEAD, which is amazing. Whereas I think for a government institution, there needs to be much more engagement, which can be difficult when it's across 15 faculties in schools. So one of the remarkable things about INSEAD is a lot of our alumni come for the diversity. They typically have to speak 2 languages before joining the MBA program, picking up a third. And after they graduate, they move all over the world, which I think is great for the network and the institution. Can be a bit challenging for fundraising in the sense that you have constituents all over the world. So unlike many of our peers in the US, we actually have 14 tax foundations, whether it be Asia to North America to Europe, in order to encourage and inspire giving. Operationally, that's quite a nightmare and a headache, because you have regulations changing year on year, capital outflows, as you know, with what's going on in the US. So rules are constantly changing, but however, it has incentivized our donor and alumni base to give. So, I mean, with INSEAD, we have global faculty, staff, alumni. So it really has a diversity quotient that is unparalleled, I feel.
And are there different advancement teams at the different campuses, or are you one big global team, or how does it work?
We are one central global team. So this is the difference also with NUS and other large institutions. You have a central, then you have individual development teams, depending on how big the school is. With INSEAD, we're one big advancement team, about 60 people, but spread out all over the world. So while I'm based in Singapore, I do manage most of my team out of Fontainebleau, France. So the time zones are...
Yeah, how does that work, right? With your time zone difference, I would imagine challenging.
Very, very. So you do US calls as well. as well as Asia. So you're constantly either traveling or on Zoom in order to connect.
You mentioned you've got a very passionate alumni base. Maybe just describe a little bit about engagement, philanthropy at INSEAD, how alumni sort of support the institution, what kind of programs work. Just sort of listeners, this is a largely an engagement focused podcast. So just like what kind of activates and engages INSEAD alumni?
I think it's the experience. The MBA program in particular is a 10-month to 12-month program. So it's 2 years compacted into one. So that when they go through this in their 30s or late 20s, it's an experience. And this is what I've encountered in interviewing different alumni. It's that moment in time when they're in transition, whether they be going from consultancy to a new career, family business, or becoming entrepreneurs. Many of the alumni, they meet their future partners, business partners through INSEAD. Some of them meet their partners in life in INSEAD as well. So that connection stays strong. And so when we do our reunions in Fontainebleau, thousands of people come back because they want to see their peers. They want to stay connected to the school. And frankly, it's unique because we are in Fontainebleau, which is Napoleon's summer home. And so many of the events that we do are in the chateau. It's hard to compare with other institutions. So there's a nostalgia, kind of a freshness that comes with this. And you can see it when they come back, whether it be their 5-year reunion to their 50-year reunion. There's always passion and reconnecting. Now, in terms of fundraising and engagement, I think everyone understands how important it is to support diversity. And this is where we support diversity through scholarships, through academic excellence, through faculty. There are other causes that resonate that we address from a business management perspective. So even AI or private capital or sustainability or wealth inequality, we do this from the lens of business management. And then that serves our base of the future leaders. So, on a topic like AI, which we'll be talking about today, we don't go into deep tech or algorithms in that same way that our science peers would, but we do look at it from a human perspective and augmenting rather than replacing. So there are such a diverse group, and many of them are entrepreneurs. I think we did an alumni survey where at least 70% of the alumni go on to start their own companies or invest in terms of private capital. In Europe, we have, I believe, most unicorns spawned from our alumni group and a large cap raise as well for these startups. So it's really invigorating to engage and hear their stories and how they've grown their ideas into real companies.
So there's a lot of value in that alumni network if you're talking about 70% of people being entrepreneurs, which is really interesting. Pivoting a little bit, we exchanged a few emails before this episode, and you talked about how you believe that the traditional model of broad-based annual fundraising, which would be called annual giving or regular giving, depending on what part of the world you're in, will gradually give way to more targeted, impact-driven approaches. I think you talked a little bit about how causes are important to your alumni base, but maybe could you elaborate a little bit on what those approaches look like at INSEAD? Like, how do you bring that cause-driven mentality into your marketing?
Sure. I believe we are definitely in the information age. We're knee deep in it, and we're bombarded with information. And with that becomes larger opportunities to do segmentation and more bespoke targeted asks. So the competition, I think globally, whether it be from your tertiary institution, your religious causes, or even international causes, becomes a proliferation of asks. So amidst the noise, you have to find a way to stand out. And that relies much more on data analytics. So we use different platforms like Eloqua to do segmented trees for outreach in order to do smarter campaigns. We are onboarding advancement. The school is already on Salesforce. We're using Copilot, coming on Perplexity as well to do profiling. I think, most institutions, large and small, struggle with finding different needles in the haystack or those ideal donors that you want to reach out to more efficiently and more effectively. And I think having a good research team, having data analytics really reduces the time to do that, especially for an institution like INSEAD where our alumni are global.
Mm-hmm.
Do you spend time in Miami or Kansas City or Colorado, not to mention Nigeria? You only have a limited amount of time in order to use your resources and things like that. So that's where you have to be much more targeted. And also after they become donors, you have to do much more bespoke stewardship that speaks to them and the impact of the causes. So in an example, scholarships are one of our, most, like most institutions, the easiest place to give because you identify as a student before, or maybe even as a scholarship recipient. You empathize with the journey, the importance of having postgraduate education, whether it be MBA or executive, in order for you to enhance your journey. And the thing is, with the diversity piece, you want to make sure that the cohort is as diverse as possible. So you don't have, if you went purely on scores, you may only have one part of the world or a few parts of the world participating, but you do want different industries, gender, socioeconomic, and that's only enabled through scholarship, given the cost of education these days. And then others, as you go up the value chain of larger donors, they most have a problem that they're trying to solve. And in terms of research, it could be in faculty, and this is where you have to identify that in your early discovery and be able to speak to that and perhaps craft something in their interest that aligns with the institutional priority, because there are always donors who are eager to help, but in their way. This is an area you have to navigate very carefully.
Yeah, it's a challenge for everybody, certainly. So we're starting to dip our toe into the AI conversation. But I think you kind of mentioned that INSEAD is at the beginning of this AI transformation, and you named a few things that you're starting to use. I guess I'd ask you two questions. One is, what do you think the potential is for AI in our space? And then I'm also so curious about, you just rattled off a bunch of different resources that you're starting to test and use. How do you get the institutional buy-in for trying those things? We all know that higher ed even business schools are not renowned for their fast-paced adaptation of new technology. So give everybody your secrets here, your trade secrets on how you're making this happen.
So I'll answer that, but before I answer that, I want to backtrack because I realized I didn't fully answer your last question. I think in terms of annual fundraising, one of the most challenging things is to reset back to zero. And after the year is over, then you go back to zero and you build up again. And sometimes leadership expects that plus 10%, 20%, whatever it is. You did so well, let's add another 20%. I think in the long run, as we start to evolve and also the creativity of fundraising, one of the areas, as I mentioned to you, because we have quite a few entrepreneurs, when we went to go speak to them, they said, we love INSEAD, we want to support, however, I have no cash. I'm bootstrapped because I'm in a startup, I've invested in my fund or private equity fund. In the future, one day, I would love to give back. So one of the things that we didn't originate, but definitely it is around, and I would advise different institutions to look into it, is the Founders Pledge, where you, on a very basic level, encourage your entrepreneurs and private equity to sign a pledge in order to give 1, 2, even 5% or more of their personal stake when there's a liquidity event. So with private equity, at least there is a fixed timeline, 7 to 8 years, maybe. Once their portion of the fund will liquidate and they will have carried interest. So super interesting, and then others in terms of startup may go IPO on the best case scenario or get bought out. And so rather than having to track and trace and follow up with them, you treat them as donors before they become donors, almost like a legacy gift, except under less morbid circumstances, and guide them along where their success is a shared success, in connecting them with other alumni, with investors, with faculty, to help their startup succeed, if not the first time, maybe the second or the third time. So we found a lot of success with that. People are signing up. We have a few liquidity events that have come forward. But one day, if you collect enough founders, then every year there could be a recurring 2 to 5% of your portfolio that becomes perhaps the next Google or the next Facebook, hopefully. And that in itself is more than you probably could raise in over a 5-year period if it is successful.
Yeah,
now, the other,
and it gets people to reflect on, how the institution has powered their success, right? I mean, and gets
absolutely.
them to reflect on that on an ongoing basis, which is exactly what you want.
And the other trickier but more interesting thing is to hold the shares. Is a way to find, even if it becomes just paper one day, if it is, as long as the institution holds the shares, they have the equity potential of the future, so that if it becomes that 1%, which is maybe valued at 50,000 US today, becomes 10 million, then you have 10 million, right? Rather than in a pledge where they would say, okay, maybe I give you 100,000. And so that's, I think, a very interesting model. I've seen others with annuities as well. Chicago Booth, they hold the shares and are paid dividends. We're coming upon a huge baby boomer generation coming in the late 50s, 60s, who have liquidity. And, this is where legacy and platforms such as this could aid and assist in the annual fundraising, so that you don't start at zero, but at least you have these transformational large gifts that can come in every so often.
Holman, talk a little bit about AI specifically, just in terms of how it's being used to innovate within the INSEAD philanthropy advancement operation, how your alumni are talking about it from a engagement programming standpoint. What are the conversations that you're helping to lead amongst your graduates versus how are you thinking about using technology, of course, at its infancy right now, but moving so fast? How are you all thinking about it?
And that's the key. It's moving so fast. I've given some presentations maybe over a year ago that are no longer relevant, nor are the ones 3 months ago, because things are changing on it. Of course, we have a very savvy tech AI funded alumni base in different investment areas. So they are on LinkedIn. They're talking about it all the time. Naturally, our top executive education offering is around AI transformation, digital as well. So how do you take traditional businesses? How do you upskill people? How do you be AI ready, future proof before the competition comes in? So definitely it's a large topic in the institution, across from our executive clients to our alumni and donors. So we do webinars. It was a big topic at our Americas conference in San Francisco, a large topic in Amsterdam at our alumni forum. That one was interesting. It was in the context of Europe. How do they stay innovation versus regulation? When their two largest players are China and the US, what role does Europe have to play in order to keep up to date? So these are really important topics, especially since the majority of our alumni are based in Europe and are faced with these challenges in terms of their business, and also trying to figure out how to scale up if they are in startups as well. So, I mean, many of our professors are doing research in it. One of them is actually trying to create a framework for a one-man unicorn scaled up with AI, and plans to have over 1,000 startups incubated, and then help scale up these that will be funded outside. In terms of INSEAD, we're really, I think, at the beginning, although the first step is getting people comfortable with the idea of AI and using AI. So definitely working with our faculty, and also we've started an AI enablement hub, which is recruiting ambassadors, AI ambassadors from different departments to champion the use of AI and to bring back use cases to identify that what we can do. So the basic ones naturally are around writing. I think the LLMs are excellent in writing, both creatively, analytically, and even the traditional dry appeals or reports and things like that. It can save so much time and allow actually people to have more time to do ideation and strategy, right? So you don't have to wait to the retreat. Now you can hopefully carve out some time every week, every month in order to kind of do some thinking about your processes and reviews. We're using it also for ideation. In some cases, when we want to come up with some campaign ideas or strategy, it's very interesting when you try to create personas in order to do quick testing and surveys. Well, if you have crisis comms, for instance, how will this segment of the alumni base react to this message? You can even create a virtual board if you wanted to, or contrarians to challenge every idea that you think is great, but are unable to see some of the shortcomings. We have such a diverse group of staff and colleagues. Getting people just used to it every day is challenging. So to your question about institution, obviously these things, these tools and systems cost money. But I think it's even more costly if you don't invest now in it and get people relatively comfortable. The other issue is around GDPR and also firewalls, right? You don't want your colleagues uploading sensitive materials, data into the cloud. And that's where systems like Copilot for us are useful as a sandbox in order to test data and create GPTs. I think we're also trying to create chatbots to save time for when we do events and you have all those questions that come by email. Say, well, where do I go? Where do I find the instructions? Actually, those can easily be done through a chatbot and save an enormous amount of time. And then one of the key areas for us in advancement in fundraising is really knowing donors. We rely on traditional external sources like WealthX and others in order to create profiles. But I think that actually can be done through different LLMs. Perplexity, for example. One of our professors is creating a customized donor tool in order for us to kind of get an overview before we meet the donor. Where do they give in terms of what are their interests in terms of philanthropy? Where else did they give? And this is information that may take time, but we can have a quick scrape and at least start a conversation in that regard. There's another interesting tool that's being created called the McKinsey in a box, which can create almost like a virtual consultant, SWOT analysis, profiling, even projections. That is amazing. In a few minutes, you can create kind of an intro deck, a discovery deck before a meeting. And that would have taken you weeks before of just time, Googling, finding the information. So overall, I think it's incredibly important in terms of improving productivity. Also budget. I'm sure many companies and institutions are being challenged. Before you hire that person or outsource it to an external writer or designer, can you do it on AI? I think this is the overriding question. Can you do it there first? And can you prove you can't? Then maybe the budget will be allowed. So we have to be much more efficient and nimble these days with AI.
I think you're right. I think that's a fundamental question. And going back to the initial comment that you made about the community of practice at INSEAD that's been formed in order to help test and to sort of observe what's out there with intentionality, bring back what that group has found. I think most institutions, if they're not doing that already, better get on that one, right? Better form your community of practice at the institutional level around AI. Well, let's pick up the conversation in our bonus segment. available for our podcast listeners. So if you are listening on LinkedIn or YouTube, be sure to subscribe to Alumless World to hear our bonus segment with Holman, and we'll keep the conversation going. But before we leave, Nicole, who are our guests coming up next on Alumless and Alumless World?
So we coming up on Alumless next Friday is Matt James from Marshall University. And our next guest on Alumless World is Jocelyn Kelty from Richmond and Associates in Australia. She's going to be talking about advancement careers and trends that she's been observing as a recruiter. I'm sure a lot of the things that Holman's just talked about in terms of, skills and AI and just awareness of all of this is going to also be part of the conversation with Jocelyn as well. So we'll look forward to having her there, and I'll see you all in the bonus segment.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back after the break.